She was just another nurse. Exhausted, out of work, waiting for a flight with nowhere to go. But when a man collapsed at gate 47, everyone froze. Except her. She didn't ask who he was. She just saved him, then disappeared. But someone saw. And days later, the world would rise for the woman who never waited to be noticed.
Welcome to TNM Incredible Story. Let's uncover what really happened.
Claire Cerbie was 32 years old. She had been awake for nearly 36 hours. Her last 3 night shifts in the cardiac ICU blurring into one long, fluorescent-lit memory. Her feet ached. Her spine hummed with the dull ache of overuse. And her hands, steady hands, trained hands, still carried the echo of pulse lines and crash carts. She wasn't flying home for a holiday or even a vacation. She was flying home because she no longer had a job. 2 weeks ago, her contract had been quietly cut in the latest round of hospital budget realignments. There was no goodbye party, just a vague email from HR and an automatic lockout of her employee portal. So when her sister called and said, "Come home, rest for once," Claire booked the flight without thinking twice. Now, she sat alone at gate 47 in Charlotte Douglas International Airport. Cardboard coffee cup in one hand, phone dark in the other. She wore her navy scrubs under an oversized grey cardigan, more out of habit than necessity. There was something about scrubs that still made her feel like she belonged somewhere. Around her the airport pulsed with life, murmurs of conversation, the occasional hiss of the intercom, the whir of suitcase wheels on linoleum. People rushed past, eyes on screens, ears stuffed with earbuds, lives in motion. But Claire noticed everything. She always had. When the man collapsed, it wasn't subtle. He was tall, mid-60s, dressed in a sharply pressed charcoal suit with a navy tie. His gait was confident, even graceful, until it wasn't. He made it 10 steps past the newsstand, then folded like a marionette with its strings cut. A dull thud echoed off the terminal floor. His briefcase skidded to the side. A sharp gasp rippled through the waiting area. Someone dropped a coffee. A toddler cried. Phones were pulled out, not to call for help, but to record. Claire was already moving. Her coffee hit the ground, her bag slung over her shoulder. She stepped around the frozen crowd like a swimmer through still water. The man lay motionless, face pale, lips graying. One leg was twisted beneath him. Claire dropped to her knees beside him and did what she was built to do. "Sir?" Her voice was low, calm. She tapped his collarbone firmly. No response. She checked for breath. Nothing. Fingers to the carotid. No pulse. "I need space," she said clearly without raising her voice. "I'm a nurse. Please step back." A few bystanders shuffled away. One dropped his phone. Another just stared. Claire opened the man's airway, tilted his head back, and began compressions. 30 sharp, precise movements. Her hands locked, her shoulders aligned. No wasted effort, no hesitation. "Someone get an AD!" she called. A security guard shouted into his radio. A teenage boy ran for help. The rest just watched, like an audience, who didn't understand the show they were seeing. By the time the AED arrived, Claire had completed 2 full rounds of CPR. She didn't pause. Pads on, clear. The shock jolted the man's chest. His body arched, then settled. No breath yet. Another round? Her forehead beaded with sweat. Her breathing remained steady. "Come on," she whispered. "You're not dying here." Compression, breath, compression, compression, and then a cough, a stuttered inhale, the flutter of eyelids. His pulse returned, slow but certain. Claire leaned back, sat on her heels, and exhaled for the first time in minutes. The EMTs arrived seconds later. Claire stood up, knees stiff, palms raw. "Initial arrest at 10:42, she said quickly. CPR started within 15 seconds. One shock at 200 joules. Rossi achieved at minute 7. Unknown medical history, with no ID on person. The lead medic blinked. "You're with the hospital?" Claire half smiled, brushing hair from her damp forehead. "Not anymore." They lifted the man onto the stretcher. He was semi-conscious now, eyes glazed but open. Claire didn't speak to him. She didn't need to. He was breathing. That was enough. A young officer approached her, clipboard in hand. "Miss, do you want to give your name for the report?" She shook her head. Doesn't matter. And just like that, she walked back to her seat as the crowd began to move again, as if nothing had happened. Someone had placed a fresh bottle of water on the chair beside her. She didn't know who. She didn't ask. She sat down, hands in her lap, heart finally slowing. A child stared at her from across the gate. Claire offered a tired smile. She didn't look heroic. She looked like someone who had simply done what needed to be done. Boarding was called 15 minutes later. Claire filed in with Group 5, found her window seat and stared out at the sky slowly burning into midday. No one clapped. No one recognized her, and she preferred it that way. Because Claire Cerbie didn't save people for applause. She did it because somewhere along the line, in the long nights, in the ER chaos, in the silences after, she had made a choice to never walk past someone in need. Claire didn't think about it again. Not really. She flew home, unpacked a half-filled suitcase in her sister's guest room, and slept for 17 hours without moving. The kind of sleep that happens only after you've outrun something. Her sister, Lauren, tiptoed around her for the first day, then slowly returned to her normal rhythm. Morning coffee, messy toddlers, and well-meaning questions Claire had no answers to. Are you going back to apply again? Do you want me to call my friend at the clinic? You okay? Claire always nodded, smiled politely, changed the subject. What could she say? That she had poured herself into a job for almost a decade and been let go with a 5-line email? That she wasn't even angry, just hollow. No one at the hospital had checked on her. No exit interview. No final patient to say goodbye to. All that training, all those long nights. And she was back to zero. So no, she wasn't okay. But she was used to not being okay. 2 days later, Lauren called her into the living room. Claire, you need to see this. On the TV screen was a paused YouTube thumbnail, grainy vertical phone footage. The title read, "Nurse saves man at airport, while everyone watches." Claire's heart did a strange skip. Lauren pressed play. There she was, navy scrubs under the grey cardigan, knees to concrete, hair coming loose in the back. The crowd stood frozen around her, like extras in a film they didn't understand. Claire in the middle, focused, calm, moving like she had done it 1,000 times before. No audio, just subtitles added by the uploader. This woman didn't hesitate. No badge, no uniform, just instinct. Who is she? The video ended with the EMTs arriving and Claire walking away, not toward the camera, away from it. It had over 2.3 million views. Claire sat down slowly. I didn't even know someone was filming. Lauren looked at her with something between awe and sadness. You didn't even care. That's what's wild about it. Claire shook her head. It was just what anyone should do. Lauren smiled. Yeah, but they didn't. That night, her inbox began to shift. A message from a local news station. A request for comment from a nurse advocacy group. Strangers writing to thank her. A woman from Oregon who said Claire reminded her of the nurse who saved her daughter. A retired paramedic in New York who wrote, "You reminded me why I got into this job in the first place." Claire didn't answer any of them. It wasn't humility. It wasn't shame. It was disbelief. The thing she had done without thinking, the thing she had done 100 times before, was now the reason people were calling her a hero, and it didn't feel real. But somewhere across the country, Matuti, in a private recovery suite at the Walter Reed National Military Medical Center, the man she had saved was wide awake. Major General Raymond T. Wallace, decorated combat physician, medical commander in 2 deployments, senior advisor to the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs. He had collapsed from an undiagnosed arrhythmia while returning from a defense health conference. And someone, a nurse, they said, had kept him alive until medics arrived. He didn't remember much. Just a voice, a touch, and a wave of strange peace in those brief seconds between heartbeat and nothingness. He had asked the staff who had saved him. They didn't know, only that she had refused to give her name. And then a junior officer knocked on his door and said, "Sir, I think you might want to see this." He watched the video once, then again, and again, not just to see the moment he fell, but to watch the woman who refused to let him go. He didn't know her name, But her hands, her poise, her presence, it was unmistakable. He turned to his aide and said 4 words, "Find her for me." 3 days later, Claire received a call from a number that began with 202, Washington, D.C. She almost didn't answer. Claire almost let the call go to voicemail. The number was unfamiliar. D.C. area code, probably spam. Her thumb hovered over the decline button as the phone vibrated silently in her lap. She was sitting on the porch, barefoot, legs curled under her on a weathered lawn chair, sipping coffee that had gone cold an hour ago. Then something told her to answer. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was that still, small instinct that had always whispered when something was about to change. "Miss Claire Cerbie?" the voice asked. She sat up slightly. "Yes, this is Claire. This is Captain Sarah Collins, assistant to Major General Raymond T. Wallace. He asked me to reach out personally." Claire blinked. "I'm sorry, what?" "General Wallace. He recently experienced a cardiac emergency. I believe you were present?" The world around her slowed. The mug in her hand felt suddenly heavy. Yes, at the airport. I did CPR." "He's asked to meet you, in person, at your convenience. All travel will be arranged. He's currently recovering at a secure military medical campus outside Arlington." Claire looked down at her bare feet, dusted with porch grit. "I don't understand. Why me?" Captain Collins's voice softened. "He believes you saved his life, and he'd like to thank you properly." The next day, a government vehicle arrived at her sister's house. Claire wore the only business casual outfit she still owned, a black blouse, modest skirt and sensible flats. Her hair was pulled into a neat bun. Her palms wouldn't stop sweating. As the SUV pulled into a secure facility outside Washington, D.C., Claire gripped her purse tight, her heart pounding with a strange mix of guilt and disbelief. She wasn't used to being summoned. She wasn't used to mattering this much. A soldier at the gate saluted the driver and waved them through. 10 minutes later, Claire was standing outside, a brushed steel elevator that opened onto a private wing marked "Officers, Medical Command, Authorized Access Only." The door at the end of the hall opened before she knocked. He stood tall, dressed not in a hospital gown, but in pressed slacks and a collared shirt. His salt-and-pepper hair was combed, his frame strong despite the signs of recovery beneath his eyes. He smiled the moment he saw her. "Miss Cerbie," he said. "It's very good to meet you." She stepped forward, still unsure. "You're the man from the airport." He chuckled gently. "Technically, I'm also the man from the Pentagon. But yes, that day I was just another stranger with a failing heart." He gestured to a chair across from his desk. Everything in the office was immaculately clean, papers stacked, awards hung with military precision. Yet there was a warmth that surprised her. "I didn't remember much," he began. "Only that I was falling, that my chest felt like it had split in two. And then a voice, calm, firm. 'You're going to be okay.'" He met her eyes. "That was you." Claire swallowed, her hands folding tightly in her lap. "I didn't do anything special. I was just there." He nodded slowly. "That's exactly why I wanted to find you." He walked around the desk and sat on its edge, closer now, more human than officer. "I've served in 2 wars. I've commanded field hospitals with no power and watched nurses perform miracles with gauze and grit. But I've also seen people freeze when it matters most. You didn't." Claire looked down. "It wasn't a choice. It's just who I am." "Exactly." He reached into a drawer and pulled out a slim folder. "Which brings me to this." He slid the folder across the desk. Inside was an official letter, sealed and signed. "Federal Civilian Medical Advisory Appointment. Department of Veterans Health, Special Rapid Response Division." Her name was printed at the top. Her resume already reviewed. The terms flexible, senior level, room for growth. Full salary, benefits, and educational funding. She looked up, stunned. "Is this real?" He smiled again. "I don't believe in medals for people doing their jobs, but I do believe in putting the right people where they can do the most good. You don't belong waiting for someone to validate your worth. You already proved it. To me, to the world." Claire shook her head, half laughing, half choking on emotion. "I'm not a hero, General Wallace stood, walked to the window. That's what every real one says. Before she left, he added one last thing. Oh, and I've arranged a housing stipend for the next 10 years. Consider it back pay for all the nights you showed up for patients who didn't know your name, and for saving mine without ever asking who I was. Claire stood in stunned silence. Why would you do that? He turned, steady as ever. Because you didn't ask for anything. And people like you deserve everything. Claire hadn't worn a badge in months. Not a real one anyway. Not the kind that clipped to a uniform or unlocked secured wings. But now, one sat in her hand, gleaming with an odd weight. U.S. Department of Veterans Health, Civilian Medical Advisor, Claire Cerbie. She didn't feel different. Not in the way she expected. There was no soundtrack swelling in the background. No sudden transformation. Just a quiet click as the elevator doors closed behind her, carrying her up to a floor she never imagined being allowed on. The facility was pristine. Glass-paneled offices, digital medical boards, military order humming beneath soft footsteps and well-rehearsed protocols. And Claire, in a fresh-pressed blouse and slate-colored medical slacks, walked among them like a ghost made visible, no longer just passing through, but invited in. A nurse coordinator greeted her outside the Rapid Response Training Wing. You must be Miss Cerbie. Claire's fine, she smiled. They shook hands. We've heard a lot about you. Claire's smile faded just slightly. I'm sure the internet had something to say. The coordinator's face softened. Not just the internet. People here know what it means to act before anyone else does. That's not just skill. That's instinct. That's heart. Claire said nothing, just nodded. Her office wasn't big. A modest corner with a window and a small framed photo. Already waiting for her on the desk. A still from the airport video, printed by someone on the team. In it, she's mid-compression. Face focused, jaw set. Surrounded by bystanders, not one of whom is helping. Underneath, in simple font, the first one to move. The weeks that followed were a quiet storm. Claire dove into work with the same quiet ferocity she had always given her patients. She reviewed emergency protocols, sat in simulations with field medics, gave feedback on civilian military training materials, but she also listened to trauma nurses who'd never had a day off during deployment, to combat medics who carried ghosts in their silence, to volunteers who treated homelessness with the same urgency as heart failure. And slowly, they started listening to her, too. One afternoon, during a training on mass casualty response, a young airman in the back raised his hand. Ma'am, sorry, but were you the airport nurse? Claire paused. The room went still. I was just someone who showed up, she said quietly. But yes. The airman straightened his spine. That's why I'm here. I saw what you did. I'm studying to be a medic now. She smiled gently. Then I'm glad I showed up. Word of her story had spread, not just online, but inside the system, among people who rarely stopped to be inspired, but still recognized courage when they saw it. General Wallace never brought it up again, but he passed her in the hall sometimes and offered a silent nod. Not as a superior, but as a peer, a quiet mutual salute. Claire was given a team, small, interdisciplinary, focused on rapid intervention in underserved veteran communities. She was asked to design real-time training for civilian nurses working in military-adjacent clinics. She even returned to school part-time, her tuition already paid as promised. But none of that compared to what happened on her third month in the role. A letter arrived, handwritten, from a mother in Idaho whose son had survived a heart attack in a supermarket parking lot. The bystander who helped him told me, I only did what I saw that airport nurse do in the video. So thank you, not just for what you did, but for letting people see what it looks like to do the right thing anyway. Claire folded the letter slowly, pressed it flat, and placed it in her desk drawer beside her ID badge. She never asked to be known. She never asked to be followed. But now people were watching, not for a symbol, not for a title, but for a reminder that some heroes don't wear rank. They just show up. It began with a ceremony, not for Claire, not officially. The airport Charlotte Douglas International, was unveiling a new wing dedicated to frontline health and emergency workers. A quiet memorial to those who had intervened, responded, helped when others hesitated. A small event. Nothing flashy. A few state officials, a scattering of news crews. Someone from the Department of Veterans Health had suggested Claire attend, just to represent the nursing side, just to be there. She had almost said no. She didn't want the attention, didn't want to stand in a room full of speeches about heroism and sacrifice and inspiration. She had simply done what she was trained to do, what she had done 100 times before. But something in her shifted, not for herself, but because maybe it wasn't just about her anymore. She arrived quietly, wearing a modest navy dress and her badge clipped inside her blazer. No cameras followed her in. She found a seat near the back. The atrium buzzed with polite applause, stage lights, and formal remarks. Someone thanked all those who stepped forward in crisis. Someone read off a list of anonymous actions that had saved lives in public places. Then came the final speaker, a familiar voice, Major General Raymond T. Wallace. He walked to the podium with the same calm authority he always carried. But this time there was something gentler behind it. 3 months ago I collapsed just beyond those doors, he began. I was dying, and I was surrounded by people who didn't know what to do. He paused. Except one. Claire froze in her seat. She didn't ask who I was. She didn't ask who was watching. She knelt beside a stranger, and she brought him back. He looked out across the room and found her. Claire Cerbie, would you join me up here? The room turned. Cameras clicked. Claire's heart nearly stopped. She stood slowly, awkwardly. People moved aside. Her shoes clicked on the tile as she made her way forward. Blinking under the lights, she stepped beside him. The general didn't speak. He simply turned to her, and in front of the entire room, saluted. A full, formal military salute. And then the entire audience rose. Civilians, officers, medics, nurses. They stood, some with hands over their hearts, some with heads bowed. And Claire, who had once slipped quietly back into her seat on a flight, hoping to forget it ever happened, now stood on a stage as the world acknowledged what she had done, not because she had sought it, not because she had claimed it, but because she didn't walk away. After the event, she found herself alone for a moment in the very spot where the man had collapsed. She stood there, breathing slowly. The floor had been polished. The lighting changed, but she still remembered. The silence, the moment when no one moved, and then, when she did. In her purse she kept one folded piece of paper, a letter, one she had never shown anyone. It read, "You don't save people to be remembered. You save them because once someone showed you it was possible. And maybe now, someone will see you and do the same." Claire Cerbie never became famous, but the world changed because of her. One life, one act, one quiet, steady pair of hands that refused to let someone die unseen. And sometimes that's all it takes. Sometimes the quietest acts leave the loudest echoes. And sometimes it takes just one person to remind us what courage really looks like. If this story moved you, don't just scroll away. Share it, leave a comment. Let someone know that kindness still matters. And if you've ever helped, or been helped, when no one else was watching, tell us your story. Because here, your story might just become someone else's reason to keep going. Subscribe to T&M Incredible Stories, where the smallest moments become unforgettable,